From a Nordic perspective, we have a lot to offer to the world in terms of how to develop wind as an important part of the energy mix.
And it's very important to take nature and stakeholders into consideration from an early stage.
To create a better understanding and to get people on board and actually help us with making this transition possible.
Nordic Energy Research travelled through the Nordics talking to thought leaders and exploring the potential of wind power solutions, onshore and offshore, and floating solutions.
It's important that we use
Nordic solutions
to global challenges.
Denmark was one of the pioneer countries to actually develop wind energy. They started with a small local wind turbine and then to become the modern technology they are today. They actually developed a standard that became the Danish standard, which is now used all over the world with 3 blades.
the Danish industry and the government has been very important in terms of developing wind as an energy industry or energy technology at all.
So if we look at just Denmark, more than 50% of the generation comes from wind power. What do you do when the wind doesn't blow and it's really cold and you want to use a lot of electricity? The answer is we import it from our neighbors. A hydropower plant in Norway, from a gas power plant in Finland, they have the best security of supply in the world, but they also have the most intermittent generation in the world. Intermittence is balanced out by flexibility elsewhere.
And really you have to think smart, you have to think about new solutions.
The electricity markets in the Nordic countries will benefit immensely from the fact that they have balancing power already on the hydropower side. The Danish will build facilities to produce hydrogen based on some of that power.
Hydrogen plays a very nice role together with electricity, and it can make it better. So it also is a solution to the intermittence when you have offshore wind, for instance, on this big scale.
You can create facilities for the production of hydrogen, for example, on energy islands closer to the production or generation of offshore wind.
I think we will produce hydrogen and make it to a floating media like ammonia. I think ammonia will be one of the key players in the future in the maritime. And then we have ships that can sail on combustion engines with ammonia.
The interconnection between the countries in the North Sea is increasing on importance as well, because there will be transfer of electricity between countries.
Wind energy offshore also leads to challenges because you need to connect it from the offshore wind farms to the onshore locations where it is needed.
These points of connections will be central in the planning of the grid and the energy structure of the North Sea as we go forward.
We see it's very challenging to have generations far away from the consumption. So if we could combine like a system that we have some production locals, solar roofs, maybe some wind power, maybe some small energy islands, in combination with the offshore wind parks, I think we will have a very good mix.
As we are moving forward, installing quite a lot of wind energy, we need to be able to store it and to be able to charge boats, cars.
When the wind is blowing a lot, then we overproduce, then we can store the energy in battery banks.
Onshore wind is, of course, something which has been going on in Norway for a long time. Norway and Sweden had the joint support system for onshore wind until a couple of years ago. The Swedish onshore wind industry has grown immensely. The amount of onshore wind in Sweden is roughly 3 times the amount of onshore wind in Norway. While the Swedes are reducing on their nuclear power, we are increasing on our hydropower in Norway. So the necessity to increase onshore wind is not as strong in Norway as it has been in Sweden.
We are a small society, but we have the complexity of a bigger society when it comes to energy also. We have really, really good wind potential.
As an isolated power system, as soon as we install one big turbine, we can definitely see what kind of measures need to be taken in order to stabilize the system.
Today we actually produce more electricity than we use with our 6 wind turbines. Between 125 and 140% of the electricity we use comes from the turbines.
The future wind turbines will be bigger, and then we will have a surplus of electrical energy that we can use to make heat. We can store all the energy that the wind turbines they are making.
We need definitely to mobilize the district heating system, as we will most likely install electric boilers supplied by wind to convert it to heat to our customers.
It's a challenge also to put the wind turbines up, because we are not a big country and there's a limited amount of sites to put wind turbines.
We have only 2 real wind turbines in Iceland, even though we have the best onshore wind resource in the world. We don't need it to take out fossil fuel, because there's no fossil fuel in the electric system in Iceland. The best sites are also very beautiful sites, so it's sometimes hard to convince people to accept the visual cost of wind turbines.
We have seen, specifically in Norway, that there are challenges in terms of the acceptance. Not in my backyard has been very strong.
Things that we have learned in the Nordics is that you need to engage the local and the public as soon as possible. The sooner you engage people and make sure that you have an open, transparent process in the entire development, deployment process, the better.
We need to make people aware that electrification and digitalization is one of the enablers of this energy transition.
The wind park just outside of the harbor of Copenhagen is a good example. Half of that is owned by people in Copenhagen that have been able to buy shares in it, and half of it is owned by the power company. The citizens of Copenhagen is feeling that it's their wind turbines and means that it is accepted and people are engaged in it.
One of the unique things about our turbines is that they are owned cooperatively by the citizens. Wind turbines can be a little bit ugly in the landscape, but when you own them yourself, then they're actually rather pretty.
From a Nordic perspective, we do have the competence of how to build turbines. We do have the competence of how to regulate the markets for wind in general. And we do also have the competence of how to build projects offshore.
Denmark is also one of these countries where you have a lot of seabed, which is rather shallow. So it's obvious to build offshore wind turbines. The wind conditions are much better out there. So it has become kind of a test bed for offshore wind turbines.
Norway would be best positioned to look at the offshore floating wind because of all the expertise we have from working in harsh environment within the oil and gas industry and the rig.
Offshore wind is a costly energy technology. We believe it will be less so, that it will be commercial for governments and for industry, bottom fixed and floating, even though floating will take some more time to develop to the right cost position.
There is still some technologies that need to advance a little bit to be competitive. And if you believe enough in this technology, you still need to support those.
So you want to do this in a very sustainable way. We also know that building new infrastructure has a big impact on the local environment. So we want to make the impact as low as possible, but at the same time, think about the climate. So it's the whole time balancing cost, environment, climate.
Energy production in general is often in conflict with environmental values, and so also with offshore wind, if not handled properly. Offshore wind development shouldn't just avoid or mitigate or compensate impact, it should also have a net positive effect on biodiversity. For instance, the exclusion of fishing and trawling activity, which makes the offshore wind farm area a marine protected area. So the genetic diversity will increase. For companies to obtain finance, license to operate, it will be important to have good marine spatial planning tools that can also include some scenario modeling to get a good understanding of the spatial requirements of the different marine industries in the years to come.
The biodiversity issue in the EU, but in general, of course, is important to everyone who builds anything, be it onshore or offshore. Speed of permitting, speed of grid development, and the readiness of supply chain to build a lot of projects at the same time in many parts of the world. And will bring down the cost to a level at which it can be built at even larger scale.
The Nordic region can be the power hub for Europe when you deploy all the wind energy that is planned.